As I played through Gears Tactics for the first time, I found myself really enjoying the experience. It simultaneously felt like something that was both new and familiar, despite being the first turn-based strategy game in the franchise. It was intrinsically Gears. I was still closing up e-holes, fighting alongside my brothers in arms, and chainsawing grubs. For the most part, I loved it, and yet at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that this had the potential to be so much more. So, to find out where Gears Tactics succeeds, and where it ultimately falls a bit short, let's start by jumping into the visuals. To get the obvious out of the way, when it comes to this genre, this is easily one of the best looking games on the market. And again, one of its biggest achievements is that despite its differences, it still manages to feel like Gears. Just like the main entries, despite never seeing them lift any weights, your soldiers are all huge mountains of meat that look like they could be the offspring of Letho of Gullet. Seriously, these guys must eat, sleep, and shit steroids. It's definitely helped give the series a very defined look. And the same can be said for many of the equally bulky set pieces. In terms of the mood, Gears Tactics manages to create an incredible atmosphere at times, especially during the night ops thanks to some killer lighting as well as little details like your soldiers' weapons being equipped with flashlights. There were several occasions where I found myself thinking, damn, this almost looks as good as the main series. Visually, the levels are some of the most detailed ones you'll see in a game like this, with all manner of interesting pieces of cover like destroyed tanks and crashed choppers. Almost every inch of every level feels like a perfect spot for a skirmish, and there's this flow to the map design that I just don't think many other strategy games out there have or will be able to match. That said, part of me wishes there was a bit more variety environment-wise. Missions that take place indoors are few and far between, and outside of the desert maps and the couple of times that you find yourself in the city, you don't exactly see much else. There are no snowy regions or forested areas. It kinda feels like they dropped the ball here. I think similar can be said for the enemy variety, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Moving on to gameplay, hence the name, this is a very tactical experience that relies heavily on careful planning and knowledge of your troops and their abilities to be able to get through in one piece. Even on the lower difficulties, it's not an easy game. The AI here is actually quite smart, and the different enemies make for some pretty neat dynamics during combat. Wretches, for instance, while quite harmless on their own, can be deadly in large groups. Cantuses buff nearby enemies, and snipers can pin you down while grenadiers and boomers break your front lines. Rushing forward without a plan in this game is basically a death sentence, as enemies will frequently flank you, as well as set up their own overwatch to keep you at bay. Though that's not to say that they too don't have their fair share of dim-witted moments. Despite its many comparisons to other turn-based games like XCOM, Gears Tactics has a surprising number of unique things going for it. Not only is it free of the bonds of a grid system, allowing you more control, but the devs have also put their own spin on things like Overwatch. In Tactics, using Overwatch actually forces you to pick a direction and range that you're going to cover, but on the flip side, allows you to shoot as many times as you have action points left, making it much easier to hold down specific areas on the map. Enemies can also use this though, so setting yourself up in smart positions where one of your teammates can disrupt an enemy's overwatch if need be, becomes a vital art to master in its own right. In classic Gears of War fashion, executions make an appearance here too, and not only are they fun to watch, but they grant your teammates with extra action points every time you chainsaw, bayonet, or beat an enemy's face into the ground. This is definitely one of the coolest features in my opinion, and without a doubt got me out of some tough situations. Overall, there's a fantastic amount of depth to the organized chaos that is the combat system in Gears Tactics. But at its core are your units. Each class is focused around a different role and are equipped with their own unique skills, weaponry, and abilities. The support class, for instance, is specialized in healing and buffing teammates, whereas the scout class is more focused on outmaneuvering enemies and dealing tons of damage at close range. In Tactics, you're given a set of 5 different classes to play around with. However, it legitimately feels like far more than that, because each class has 4 specialized branches that you can spec into, effectively leaving you with a total of 20 different roles to fill, and that's not even counting any of the hybrid builds that are possible. On top of their skills, your soldier's gear also plays an important role in Tactics. Finding new armor and weapon attachments not only allows you to kick ass in style, but it also grants you with valuable bonuses like increased ammo capacity or a higher critical hit chance. And man, I gotta say, there is a boatload of stuff here. I probably spent at least a third of my time with the game just tinkering around with the look of all my soldiers. If you want to make a squad full of all your friends or a team of Onyx gears, that's totally doable. And they have plenty of cosmetic-only items as well, like scars and tattoos. While there aren't many, Tactics also features some excellent boss fights, with the giant enemies like Brumox and Corpsers. And boy are they challenging. As is the case with any good boss fight, they all have multiple stages, so as the battle progresses, things get tougher and tougher. But arguably, one of the most difficult things here isn't the boss itself, but the fact that you're typically forced to fight other enemies at the same time. I'd have to say that my main issue with the gameplay is that at best, the enemy variety is passable. By the end of Act 2, you will have seen just about all there is to see when it comes to the different Locust variants, and there aren't all that many, especially when you take into consideration the wealth of possibilities that have already been provided by the previous games in the series. What we have here feels somewhat lacking in comparison. We're completely missing core enemies like Berserkers and some of the more interesting side variants like Maulers and Grinders. This is another thing that they can hopefully improve upon should we ever see a sequel. With the gameplay out of the way though, let's move on to sound.
What now? There! A way around! Great, the goddamn scenic route! What's the play here? Backfall! Now! What? You going bad shit? Move!
Low on ammo!
I'm listening. Ready. Advancing. Outgoing frag! Tell your friends, asshole.
And we'll go ahead and kick things off with the sound of combat. This one's a bit tricky given the fact that Tactics is a turn-based game. And what I mean by that is that while everything sounds like it should, you don't exactly have a bunch of madness happening all at once, as you would in a normal shooter. Everything is a lot more isolated here. That said, the individual sounds are done very well. They're basically all sampled from the main games, but I don't see that as a bad thing. There's nothing quite like the sound of Lancer fire chewing through an enemy, or the sound of a lucky grenade finally going off near an enemy's feet. But again, due to the game's turn-based nature, the tension during firefights could have easily been lost, if it weren't for the music. The soundtrack in Gears Tactics is what really gives the experience that hectic feel. It features a heavy amount of strings with some hints of brass instruments, drums, and even some electric guitar thrown into the background. And it's all organized in a way to make you feel like danger is lurking around every corner. The voice acting is also top-notch, and my only gripe here is that the main character's voice doesn't quite fit his face. It's just a bit too boyish in my opinion. The casting for the other characters like Sid and Michaela though feels spot on. And apart from a couple cringy moments surrounding Gabe and Reyna, which I think you could attribute more to the writing, the actors put on some great performances, especially when emotions are running high.
Diaz, it's late.
I just saw Ukon get his head blown off. And stand right back up. What else aren't you telling me?
Your orders are to kill him, not write his biography.
The cog put me here before. We're keeping secrets got good people killed.
And some secrets also keep people alive. Now do your job.
Additionally, the sheer amount of dialogue that takes place during combat truly allows for your soldiers to feel more alive. And you gotta love the number of different accents they've included when it comes to the customizable troops. There's Australian accents, British accents, American accents, Asian accents. It's very reminiscent of the mainline Gears titles and their diverse cast of OG characters like Samantha and Kim. They also apply some pretty cool voice effects on top of characters that you have wearing helmets too. But now, without mentioning any spoilers, that brings us to the story. Gears Tactics takes place 12 years before the events of the first Gears of War, and has you playing as Gabe Diaz, a defiant soldier and the father to Kate Diaz from Gears 4 and 5, as he and his companions take on the Locust Horde and Ukon, an evil mastermind of sorts who's figured out a way to create his own army of souped up monsters. Overall, it gets the job done. It's not the best story you'll ever see, but it's not the worst either. There's some good twists, some decent humor, and even some interesting lore surrounding the origins of the Locust, thanks to the time period that this game takes place. And with a game like this that's 99% combat, it's super important that that 1% is filled with downtime where you can better connect with the main characters. And Gears Tactics definitely has that.
Listen. What I did before. Well, it was a bad call. I just wanted payback. For all the shit the cogs made me do. I put you all in danger. I'm just trying to make that right.
I will say though that I miss the grittiness of the original trilogy, and how the writers weren't afraid to take the narrative to some really dark places, especially with characters like Ty and Maria. They helped make the Locusts feel like a much more formidable threat, and added a sense of emotional weight to the story that we just don't get enough of here. Quite frankly, the highest points in this journey are no doubt going to be the ones that you create in your head, as some of your most beloved characters watch their friends bite the dust beside them, or eventually meet a gruesome fate of their own. It's often because of the fact that you never know whether it's going to be one of your troops' last missions that there's always that added bit of tension when you step onto the front line. It's for sure one of the highlights of a game like this, and yet it's also an area where Gears Tactics could stand to improve a bit more. While the death of a character might mean a lot to you as the player, it doesn't have a huge effect on the characters around them. Something like the bonding system from XCOM 2 would have been awesome to see here, and no doubt a perfect fit for Gears considering themes like brotherhood have always been so strong in the franchise. But again, perhaps we'll see it in a sequel. With all of that covered, it's time to give this game a final rating. For me, Gears Tactics was a good first attempt at something new, and while it's still a lot of fun, it also feels more like a foundation that's ultimately a sequel away from greatness, leaving this one at a 7 out of 10 for me. If you're a huge fan of Gears of War or turn-based strategy games in general, feel free to jump in now and give this one a shot, as it does add some pretty unique changes to the typical turn-based formula, and you'll most likely enjoy it despite its flaws and a few bugs. If you're not the biggest fan of these games, however, I'd say you're probably better off waiting for a small sale. But anyways guys, that's gonna do it for this review, so thanks for watching, hopefully you found the video helpful, and as always, I will see you in the next one.